And this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help us God. And so tonight we are going to watch Charlie Kirk interview, Tucker Carlson interview Charlie Kirk. I've been putting these up because YouTube has a tendency to deplatform and to hide things, and so to protect these podcasts, I am putting them up this way. So I invite you in to my game room to come in and watch this video with me. Get you something to drink. It's a huge pop. Get you some popcorn. Me and my wife and my son went to see Are You a Racist by Matt Walsh. Was that Saturday night, and so I have leftover popcorn and I have leftover pop. Maybe I should do the rattling now before I'm going to disturb you, but we do want to watch Tucker Carlson interview Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to get out of the way and get this started. So here is Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk.
This is so cool. Thank you for having me. Thank you. This is our 7th night on the road across the country, and I decided to, leave my lair and head out for a month for 2 reasons. One, because you cannot censor a live event, which I'm grateful for. And
right.
2, because I just wanted to feel better about the country that I love. And it's worked. It's unbelievable. It's true. In fact, I always think to myself, we moved out of the city about 5 years ago. And I thought, I hate cities. I'm never going back to a city again. They're all awful. And this is our 7th city, and they've all been great. It's incredible. Wichita, I've wound up in Wichita a lot in my life. I know a lot of people here. I'm not exactly sure why, but I've had a wonderful time every time I've ever been here. We're in Kansas City, Tulsa, Colorado Springs. They're all great. And then I realized, really, it's just New York and LA are awful, and every other place is pretty excellent. So thank you. You forget that because if you read the news or watch the news, basically all news is filtered through Los Angeles and New York, which are obviously cesspools. And so you get the impression that everything else is like that, but it's not like that at all. The country is not insane. People are really nice. They're not mad at each other. They love each other. And you lose track of that if your reality is filtered. I can't hear what you're saying, but I agree with you. I know that. But yeah, it was making me too frustrated, the news coverage of America. And one of the questions I had that I haven't really resolved is, how did I get in journalism? Like, it's disgusting. How did I wind up here? I was just thinking that the other day. I cannot believe I do this for a living. And actually, the honest answer is because I couldn't get another job. And I hadn't done well in college. I didn't have a college degree. I was getting married. My father-in-law was insistent that I have gainful employment, stickler. And so I applied to a bunch of places. They turned me down. I don't think they even bothered to respond. And so I went to my father and I said, what should I do? He had been a journalist. And he said, you should, go into journalism. They'll take anybody. That's actually what he said, and that's actually why I went. I went primarily because it seemed kind of interesting, and you could see the world and listen to people and hear cool stories and have experiences you could tell your grandchildren about. Not that they'll listen, but you could at least, I was there. But really I went into it because it's easy. That's the truth. It's easy. Journalism? You don't have to do anything. You have no real skills. You just repeat what people tell you. And if I'm being completely honest, and I think I am, for like about 25 years out of 33, it really was the easiest job ever. Ever. Because politics is not complicated. And listening to people and recording what they say is not hard. It's not, actually we have machines that can do it now. This was pre-AI. About maybe 8 years ago, it became very difficult. And not just because I realized that everyone else in the business with me was repulsive, but on a deeper level, which I did realize. And I told them, and they fired me again and again. No, the real reason it became...
You're repulsive.
No. You should never brag about being fired, but I've been fired so often that I just have no choice. Making a virtue out of a necessity. No, the reason that well, I love you too, thank you. No, the reason it became hard is because I no longer understood what was happening in the news. I lived in Washington for 35 years. I covered politics. Very, very simple business to cover because there are two parties. Each one wants power. In order to get power, each one makes promises to the voters who are the source of their power, of course, in a country that claims to be democratic, constitutional republic. All power derives from the consent of the governed because they own the country, not the politicians. And so, that's just a fact. I'm just repeating back to you your founding documents. And so it's very, very simple. Each side, every 2 or 4 or 6 years, gets up and says, if you vote for me, I'll give you this. And the other side says, no, I'll give you more. And the person, who makes the better case about how they're going to improve the lives of the people who vote wins. And then we can assess whether they actually did what they were going to say. Around 8 years ago, at least one party, and to some extent both parties, but certainly one party, stopped making that case. Stopped pretending that they were going to improve the lives of the people who lived here, and instead started saying out loud, and now they're shouting it, if you elect us, we're going to make things much worse for you. And actually, we're going to punish you. And all the things that you want, we're going to give you none of them, and instead we're going to give you the things that you fear most, like going extinct. And they just started to kind of say that. And all of a sudden, I became completely confused. How could you run for office on the promise that if you vote for me, you'll be less likely to have grandchildren? Truly, really? The one thing that every middle-aged person wants is grandchildren. No, you'll have less. You actually were against having children at all. The one thing that brings you joy, particularly in old age, your descendants, we're going to do everything we can to prevent you from having that. And by the way, we're also, one of the things you probably enjoy is eating, but we're going to prevent you from doing that by provoking famines around the world. What? I'm watching this, I'm thinking, what could possibly be the impulse behind these policies? Every single policy, whether it was climate change, transgenderism, abortion, whatever, all of it was designed to reduce the number of people on the planet. And that's really a weird impulse for people to have. And then today I learned, and this is completely consistent with everything we've seen, that we are very close to a nuclear exchange with a foreign power. Because the Biden administration is on the cusp of sending missiles into mainland Russia, including Moscow. And kind of no one is debating this or talking about it. In fact, I think we're not even allowed to talk about it. You just have to ignore it. Well, and I'm not going to get into too much detail because I don't want to be depressing. And by the way, there's an upside to this whole story, which I'll get to in just a second. But right now, we are provoking this country that we're not actually supposed to be at war with, we're not technically at war with, into launching nuclear weapons in response. And once that happens, of course, we're done. Because you can't recall a nuclear missile. There's no capacity on that. Once they're launched, they land. And we have no way to shoot them down. And so once they're on the way, we're done. And the destructive power of them is so much beyond what most people understand. If there's no resemblance at all to what happened in the summer of 1945 in Japan, it's 100x that. So then we really are flirting with extinction right now. So I realized this morning based on conversations that I had with people outside the country, and I thought, this is just absolutely nuts. So I called a bunch of people who I thought could kind of get the word out, and they were like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Nobody was willing even to entertain that reality. It was really, but they're, inflation, that's the thing. I was like, no, you understand. We're on the verge of a nuclear exchange. Yeah, okay. Anyway, and then change the subject. And I thought to myself, maybe it's just too dark for people to fully accept. And then I thought, but what would be the impulse behind this? And this is the point of what I'm saying. The impulse behind all of these different policies is in no sense political. This is not politics. I would say it's not even human. And here's why I say that. Because the goal of every animal species, including people, is to send their genes continuing through history, is to reproduce, right? That is evolutionary biology in one sentence. Our main impulse is to pass our genes on to the next generation and a generation beyond. And all animals behave that way. And dogs do not commit suicide or genocide, period. Whatever they may, you know what I mean? They may make a mess on your rug, but they're not going to do anything intentionally that gets in the way of passing on their genes. That is their goal. That is the goal of every animal species. That's the natural goal. That is life, actually, as described by naturalists. That's nature. And so if you see any kind of movement that would even potentially stop people from passing on their genes, you know you're not dealing with nature. You're dealing with something above or outside of nature. You're not dealing with the natural, you're dealing with the supernatural. And so any movement that seeks to convince people not to have children or eat, or who provokes wars for the sake of killing. We often say, well, these people are all making money on wars. True, much deeper than that. If you're getting to the brink of nuclear war, and that isn't so horrifying to you that you do whatever you can to stop it, because of course it would mean the end of humanity, if your instant gut response isn't, we can't have that, whatever it takes to prevent that, we're gonna do now. Because of course our obligation is to future generations, it's not to ourselves, it's to people yet unborn, human beings yet unborn. If that's not your gut reaction, then you're being controlled by something outside the human realm. Because that's not natural. That is the most unnatural instinct you can have. Now, I'm not approaching this as a theologian, which I hardly am. I'm an Episcopalian from Southern California, so I'm not writing any theology books, okay? I'm approaching this from a rational standpoint. What's the other explanation? How could Tony Blinken at the State Department and Joe Biden in the White House, I'm assuming Joe Biden even exists at this point, I mean, he does in some literal sense, how could every single one of their policies be anti-human? Is that an accident? I don't think it is, actually. I think what we're seeing here is a manifestation of the spiritual battle that's been described by every civilization since the beginning of time. And again, I just want to say that I'm not saying that as, you know, someone who's so pious and faithful as a Christian that you should follow my example. Please don't. I'm saying that as someone who is searching for another explanation, and I can't find one because there is no rational explanation for what we're seeing now. There is none. You're encouraging people not to reproduce? No human being would ever encourage other human beings not to reproduce. Again, is there any precedent for that in the animal world? I know that we're encouraged not to pay attention to animals. That's another thing that I have noticed, and to ignore nature completely. Completely. You can't even see the stars in most places because of the light pollution. But we are absolutely encouraged to ignore the natural world. That's the message of our design and the buildings that our leaders build, of the lives that they encourage us to live. Stay indoors, addicted to the screen, addled on SSRIs, just don't notice everything around you. And I think one of the reasons that they encourage that is because if you did pay any attention at all to the natural world, you would know that what we're going through right now is not natural at all. So I think that's the way to think about it, and I will leave it to you and your individual religious practices on how to respond to that, but I will just say that there's another side to the story which gives me hope, and the reason that I am going to sleep like an animal this evening, as I always do, is the following. So what we're looking at is evil. We're not looking at, you know, a competing set of ideas or ideology or communism. There are a lot of communist-inspired ideas, but communism itself never made sense as an ideology. It's not an ideology. It's an anti-human impulse that comes from some outside source, obviously. Whenever you're killing large groups of people for no reason, you're clearly being inspired by something supernatural. I mean, let's just be honest about it. So we're seeing evil that's very shocking to a lot of people. It's shocking to me at least once a day for the past 5 years. I thought, I cannot believe how much evil there is in the world. One thing I have not thought of at all until very recently, which is even more surprising, and no one ever says it, is how much good there is in the world, which also doesn't make sense, by the way. So if, like me, you bought into the evolutionary biology framework for understanding people, why do people do the things that they do? Well, to preserve themselves and their descendants, right? Right. I think all Americans were raised believing that. We've been doing this since cave times. Here's why we do it. There is no rational explanation for altruistic love between people. There is no way that science can describe or justify what you see every day, which is people giving of themselves, not for profit, not for any conceivable benefit at all, to other people, including people they're not related to, including people they don't even know. Why are they doing that? There's no rational explanation. The science cannot tell you why they do that. There's no benefit to them at all. And in fact, in a rational world, if the scientific framework were real, which it's not, it's totally fake, but let's just say it were, how could you explain that? How does that help you to give your money to someone you don't even know? To listen really carefully to someone, just to make that person feel better, to make that person feel connected, to display empathy. What's the advantage in that? No advantage at all. And yet you see it constantly, all the time around you. And I think you see it more now than you ever have. In other words, one of the reasons that I, despite being bewildered and shocked by what we're watching all around us, wake up in a good mood every single day is because I think that the evil that we see is being more than counterbalanced by the good that's suddenly erupting all around us. I feel that in this room. I felt it in every place we've traveled around the country. Every morning I wake up and I think, boy, this country's got all these problems, and some of them are very, very severe. Not just that they're eating the pets, which I do think is a problem. And the most hilarious thing ever said, by the way, Trump will never get credit for just being amazing. If they're eating the pets, that was the highlight for me. First of all, because I know it's exactly true. They're not eating the pets, they're sacrificing the pets in witchcraft ceremonies, actually. That's true. But, so the country does have a lot of problems, actually. And immigration is by far the biggest problem. There's a higher percentage of people born outside the country living in this country now than at any time. That makes it, and every one of them could be a future Nobel Prize winner, and it doesn't matter because it destabilizes the country completely. And it makes it really hard for 350 million of us to have anything in common and to hang together as a country. So it's a really dangerous thing to do. It's a destructive thing to do. There's no justification for doing it other than to destroy what other people built, which is what's happening. So of course that's incredibly sad to watch, really, really sad. If you're from here, and if like me, you plan to die here, you don't have another passport, I'm gonna be buried with my parents, you know what I mean? Like most people. If you're really vested in this country, if you burned your boat, or if your ancestors did, it's very, very sad and it's scary. But I'm still in a good mood because I feel, again, all around me, this resurgence of much deeper connection between people. And it comes after the saddest 4 years, probably since the Civil War, where the people in charge stayed up late figuring out how to divide us from the people that we love most, from our families. I mean, the whole point of COVID actually was to blow up your family, and in some cases that worked. And if you watched the news during that whole period, they would tell you, when you go home for Thanksgiving, you may have some elderly racist relatives, and you should scream at them at the table. And if you're a good person, you will. And in fact, if you're a really good person, don't even ever talk to them again, because it's not a cult, trust me. Just cutting you off from your family, not a big deal. Which, by the way, was the greatest crime committed during COVID. That was the greatest crime. I personally think the vax was a crime. I think history will prove that. But I'm not even going to have that debate out of respect and sympathy for people who took it. I mean that. Actually, a lot of people I love took it. I've never met anyone who didn't take it, who regrets not taking it. Is there anyone here who didn't take it who feels really bad about not taking it? Probably not. So without even getting into the COVID vax, I think the greater crime, even the crimes that you do to the spirit are, of course, much more grave than the crimes you do to the body. And the crime that was committed in this country against us, its people, was the division that was manufactured, that was engineered between family members. And those mandates and the fear that was generated, the hysteria that was generated, was designed, I believe, it's very obvious in its effect, to blow apart relationships between people, and it worked. And if you're wondering, well, how do you know what the motive was? Well, of course, I can't prove it, but I'm old enough now, quite advanced age, to have decided that the effect is the motive, actually. The effect is the motive. In other words, if you keep doing something again and again, and it has the same effect, you can tell me you plan to have another outcome, but I don't believe you, and I don't need to believe you. Because I judge a tree by its fruit. And if you cause something again and again and again, whether you know it or not, you meant to cause that, and you can be held responsible for it. And the net effect of that whole period, from the day that George Floyd OD'd on fentanyl outside the convenience store in Minneapolis until now, has been to blow apart the most important and sacred thing that we have, which is the relationship between each other. That's the whole point of life, is to love the people around you, and anyone who makes that harder is a criminal in the deepest sense. And so, like a lot of people in this room, I experienced that. I feel like I've gotten off pretty easy in this life relative to what I deserve, probably, but even I, had that experience. I'm sure every single person in this room had an experience where, you lost people you loved, the relationship between someone you really loved or were related to was damaged by that whole period. You probably lost, like me, I lost every acquaintance. Like no one I had lunch with 10 years ago would even return my text at this point. And I think that's not super uncommon, even for those of you who haven't alienated the world on cable news. And so that's really sad for me, because what I really care about, much more than Carmela Harris or whatever she's calling herself, is my relationships with other people. So that's all very sad, and I'm saying it because I think that most people in this room, I think most Americans, can relate to exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm saying it as a kind of predicate to what I'm going to say now, which is the upside. Those relationships have been replaced tenfold with relationships that are much deeper. I mourn the death of my relationships. I don't care who it's with. I miss the Valley Parker after I get my car back. But the relationships I now have are so much deeper and so much more honest and so much more fully grounded in truth than any relationships I've ever had before. And as I said, I grew up in Southern California, so I was trained from a very young age to be shallow. I mean, really from birth. And the world that I grew up in, a dinner table conversation, like a full dinner table conversation, and we ate very fast in Southern California in the 70s because it was all fast food, but like the whole 6 minutes of dinner in the car would consist of, sorry, it's not the Midwest, we had things to do, and the main thing that we had to do in Southern California was to talk about the weather. And like we had days that would go from 73 and partly cloudy to all the way up to 75 and sunny. And then it would go back to partly cloudy and in the low 70s. And so that really was the substance of the conversations taking place all around me for my entire childhood. And I'm not joking at all. If you lived in San Diego in 1980, you know what it was like. Like nobody had a last name and nobody talked about anything that mattered, ever. And if you did, you were a freak. You were a freak. No one died where I grew up. Not one person ever died. There was no death, period, none. And there was an incredibly wide strike zone on like personal sexual behavior. So if you were like a polygamist or something, totally cool. Oh, that's interesting, really. It's gonna be 76 tomorrow. Did you know that? Yeah, really, wow. But if you ever mentioned physical degradation of the body or the passing of a human life, man, you were just banished. You were set onto an ice floe, like the Inuit. Like people never died in La Jolla, California. They just went out to Palm Springs, in the Mercedes, and like you never saw them again. But it was like a vacation. It was never spoken of ever, because it was just too deep, and it raised all kinds of questions, like maybe we're not in charge of the universe, and maybe life ends, and no one wanted to deal with that at all, ever, not one time. So for me, raised on a steady diet of shallowness, it has been an amazing and life-changing experience to have really deep conversations with almost everybody I talk to. And I just want to say that that is not just an upside, that's the whole point. That is why we're here. There's no other reason to be here. And, you know, having gone up and down in my financial fortunes, you know, pretty low, pretty high, I can tell you, you know, it's bad to be in debt for sure, but like making money does not make you happy. Sorry, spoiler alert. Someone told me the other day that, and I can never even remember her name, but she's like a deeply tormented pop star who just endorsed Harris. Whatever her name is.
Taylor Swift.
Megyn Kelly told me last night that she's made $1 billion. $1 billion. And I thought to myself, I may even have said it, like, then why isn't she happy? Why is she so miserable? She made $1 million, $1 billion. Don't you sort of retire and just smile until you die? In fact, you never die, actually. You live forever if you make $1 billion. And she's so miserable. I've never heard a word of her music. But I just look at her and I'm like, wow, you hate yourself. It's bad. Carmela Harris, same thing. You hate yourself. I feel deep sympathy for, I did until I found out she had a gun, and now I feel a great threat. She has a gun? Who armed Carmela Harris? No. What kind of gun is it? What side does the bullet come out? Where'd she get it? Does she have a license for that? What's she planning to do with it? What does a person who's surrounded by armed bodyguards I'm paying for 24/7 need with a firearm? You doing a lot of grouse hunting, Carmela? What? Anyway, these are questions that no one in the media will ever ask. I think they're super interesting, like why not? Sorry to get sidetracked. But I guess what I'm saying is, there is a way to look at what's happening around us that will only defeat you and turn you into the hateful monster they accuse you of being. That is true. And one of the things I've learned only recently, having been denounced as a whatever, you name it, I've been called it. I only realized recently that part of the reason that they call people names is so that people will become those things. If they treat you with that level of contempt and unfairness, it's totally possible you'll become hateful, actually. Like, you'll become what they say you are. And that's the one thing that you can't become. You cannot be hateful, because then you'll just be Taylor Swift or Carmela Harris, like another tormented, unhappy person with no kids projecting hate outward toward everyone else. And don't be that. That's, not only is that bad for the country, it's bad for you. So how do you keep from becoming that? And here's one trick that has really worked for me. I don't know what you said, but that was like an animal growling, and I loved it. I believe in animal sounds, by the way. As someone who talks for a living, I'm a little bit unsold on words, but if you go rah like that, I know you're being sincere. Like, I trust my dogs. They never lie to me, you know? But here's the point. One way to see reality is through the lens that, you know, most of us perceive it through, which is our phone. It's literally a lens. It's a piece of glass, and we're staring at it, and everything on it is curated. And at some point you have to wonder, like, why are they telling me this? Is there some reason? Maybe they're not being totally honest. And one of the reasons, of course, is to distort you as a person and turn you into a monster, like they are, of course. Another reason is to dispirit you so they can control you, so you just give up completely. But above all, it's really to break your spirit. Of course, it's to humiliate you. That's why Joe Biden hired that press secretary. You know what I mean? I was confused by that. At first, I was like, wait a second. The job of the press secretary is to talk, but you're illiterate. So wouldn't you be the last person? Like, I'm dyslexic, okay? Very dyslexic. If you hired me to do your taxes, that would be an act of self-harm. Like, you'd have to want to go to jail to hire me to do your tax, because I can't. So if you're hiring Corinne Jean-Pierre for a job that requires talking, maybe there's something else going on here. And I don't want to be mean at all. I say this with great sympathy, but this is someone who's so dumb she can't operate a toaster. Like, I can't believe she can breathe unaided. Like, this is truly a stupid person who has that kind of amazingly modern combination of low IQ and high self-esteem, which is always bewildering. To me, studies have shown this, that the dumbest people think they're the smartest. Like, I'm a historic first. Really? You're a moron? Okay. But anyway, so what's the point of that? You would have to really try to get someone that inarticulate to be your spokesman. Notice the word spoke is in the word. And then I realized, no, once again, the outcome is the motive. It's this way for a reason, and the reason is to make you feel bad about your country. If this country's so screwed up, they have someone who can't speak English talking to me about what my government is doing, and I can't understand what she's saying, and she hates me. Yeah, that's the point. So that can drive you crazy. And it's meant to drive you crazy. So the only way not to become a monster and crazy, and I've come right to the edge of both, so I'm speaking from experience, is to see the reality that's actually around you. Not through your phone, but around you. And yes, that very much includes nature, and it very much includes animals, okay? Spending time with animals is medicine. It's true, that's just true. But the most important thing is to take stock of the people in your orbit. And they are what matters, much more than anything that happens in Washington or anything that comes across social media. The people right around you. And if you're looking for your duty in this life, like, what's the purpose of my life? What am I here for? Fewer people ask those questions than ever before, but you still hear them. It's super obvious. Like the person in bed next to you called your spouse. And the children you created, and your siblings, and your parents, and your coworkers, and your neighbors, and your nieces and nephews, and your drunk brother-in-law, and everyone who God has put right in front of you. Your job is to serve and love them. That's your first job. That's your main job. And it's wild to me how distorted that has become. Again, probably not an accident by people who preach about altruism. They're like, no, really, the point of life is to serve the community or someone in some country you've never visited and send mosquito nets to some faraway place, none of which I guess I'm against. But only after every person in the concentric circles of the orbit around me, I'll speak for myself as a head of household, only after all of them are thriving, and only after I've served all of them to the maximum extent of my ability, am I going to be sending mosquito nets to some other country. Only after I have tipped my beleaguered waitress 50% am I going to think about serving someone I've never met. Because the point of love is not abstract, it's concrete. And if you love someone whose name you don't know, maybe it's not love. Maybe it's narcissism, actually. Maybe you're doing it so you can feel good about yourself without actually loving anyone. The whole concept of a community is itself fraudulent. What does that even mean? No woman ever gave birth to a community.
It's a
community. What are their names? It's a community. I don't know. Then you don't know anything. And you're not loving them. It's not possible to love groups of people. It's only possible to love people. Period. And so really what this is a war between the oldest war there is. Everyone loves, right? But there are two kinds of people who love. Those who love the people, they're the ones who routinely commit genocide. And those who love people, and those are the ones you should love back. It's really simple. People, individuals. And so I can say I take stock every single day of everyone in my orbit, and that's a ton of people. It's a ton of people, and it's not just family members, it's everyone I work with, and it's everyone I know. And I have to say, I don't know what this means. Maybe I'm just uniquely blessed, but I bet if you assess your life in the same way, you will come to the same conclusion. They're doing pretty well. They are. And some of them are having, trouble buying their groceries. That's all true. Like all the macro problems are real problems. And long term, they're massively important for us. From nuclear war potentially to the debt overhang. It's all real. But what's more real are the individuals that we are called upon as our most basic and sacred duty to serve and love. And if they are thriving, you should be in a good mood. And don't let anything Carmela Harris, who's never tipped a waitress in her freaking life, tells you. Don't let them define what success is. Success is the happiness of your people, the people with names and fingerprints and opinions and desires and dreams and souls. Their happiness is the measure of your happiness. Period. And if you keep that in mind, I don't even know your names, but like, oh, I feel the warm vibe of everyone in this room, and that's way more important to me than anything that happened in the debate. So with that, I will stop and introduce with pride and affection my friend Charlie Kirk, who's an amazing person. And there are a lot of things I could say about Charlie Kirk, who is the single most effective organizer of conservatives in the United States. Charlie Kirk is doing what the RNC was supposed to do. We have a political party for this. But they're chartering jets and ordering floral arrangements, so they don't have time. But if you're looking for the organization that, I don't know, might keep voter fraud to a dull roar, it's Charlie Kirk's organization. So I think he has a really meaningful place in American politics, but that's not necessarily a compliment because most political people I know are sort of loathsome on both sides. So the thing I'll say about Charlie Kirk and Heartfelt is that Charlie Kirk spends more time each day working as hard as he can to maintain moral balance and to serve the people around him who he actually is responsible for, his wife and children, and to be a decent human being than anybody in American politics. And he's pulled it off. And I just really, really appreciate that. I don't trust anybody whose personal life isn't in order. I'm sorry, I just don't. And his is. So it's with admiration and anticipation, because he's super interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk, ladies and gentlemen. Charlie, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Tucker. Hello, Wichita. Great to be here.
It is. I'm sure it'll get you in some kind of trouble, that intro, but it is literally true. Is it kind of weird to have like replaced an entire political party?
I mean, I don't know if we've done that, but okay. But
Yeah,
just to be fair, I mean, the RNC used to be so weak and so feckless. There's not much to replace. But
well, that's totally fair.
And the reason being, and this was our argument from the beginning, is that every one of you deserve a Republican Party as conservative as you are. Period. You deserve your leaders and your leadership to at least be in the same ballpark of your values. And we've seen this, Tucker, over the last couple of years, especially recently, where in this audience, there's not a single person who thinks we should send money to Ukraine while we are currently being invaded. They think it's insane. And yet, that is, so you have 7,000 people here tonight in Wichita, Kansas, that has basically unanimous agreement that our own borders come before the borders of a foreign country. Super simple. Super simple. However, that is a minority opinion held by Senate Republicans. And that's right there, we've identified something of which revolutions are made of.
Well, I think that's a really insightful point, and just for people who don't have context on this, you would know because you know all the Senate Republicans, and no one is, you're not guessing in any of this.
I know every single one of them, at least I can profile them and I know what they believe, and I know at least 80% of them personally, from text message, phone calls, and you lived in DC. And it's as if they believe once they're in Washington, there's a secret society that they enter, and you guys just don't understand it like they do. And again, not only are they wrong, but they're not there to actually come up with their own opinions on these issues. Their first concern should be, what do my voters want? Because they're your proxy. That's the system we have set up here. It's not an oligarchy where they're there to tell you what they think in some sort of a meeting with their national security team. No, instead it's they're there to fulfill the mandate that the people put in the ballot box. And so we have a breakdown of our system, and it's not just that issue, but it's issue after issue of major things that are tearing this country apart. And what gives me hope, but also anger, is the people get it. Is that the people in this audience never want to see our country locked down again and called the church not essential. The people in this audience do not want to see the FBI get another building while moms and dads are being profiled at school board meetings. Steve Bannon is in federal prison, and Donald Trump is facing 700 years in federal prison. Why are Republicans giving the FBI a new building? So the people get it, but our leaders seem as if they don't care about what their voters think. We're trying to fix that at Turning Point Action. We're trying to make the very easy adjustment that the people and the voter sentiment should be mirrored by how the Republicans in DC act.
But I gotta say, bless you for saying everything you did, but I just wonder, this seems like a crisis to me, because the only legitimacy that our leaders have is the consent of the governed. We don't have a hereditary monarchy, we don't have an oligarchy. Our system is based on the idea that democracy they're claiming to save is based on a single idea, which is the people own the country, and that our leaders are legitimate to the extent that they reflect our desires and views. And when they don't, they're illegitimate. They're tyrants. That's our system. Is it not? Am I missing something?
And it hasn't been our system for a couple decades, but Donald Trump revealed that that system was no longer in existence, and that might be his greatest and longest lasting contribution, is that he comes around and says, wait a second, you guys want a border wall and you don't want millions of people coming across your border. Why has Mitch McConnell been in Washington, D.C. for 40 years and we don't have a border wall? Why is it that Republicans have been running this place for so long and you guys have these concerns that are constantly ignored? Why is it that we send our factories overseas to foreign nations and yet we have trillions of dollars to go colonize Iraq and Afghanistan and try to have gender reassignment surgeries in Syria or whatever the State Department is interested in? And you're correct. What we're experiencing over the last decade, in my opinion, is the revealing that the founders' constitutional system has not been around for quite some time. That the consent of the governed is a mirage. We have these things called elections, and that you vote for the lesser of two evils, which you should all do, but then they actually don't do what you want them to do when you send them to DC. Trump changed all of that. And Trump changed that by going after the fundamental problems of what really Washington, D.C. cares about. Number one, that we should not import endless foreigners from the third world while our own citizens are suffering. That is number one. Number two, the thing called free trade is a scam to get your garages filled with plastic that you'll never use while your local factory closes and the school can't make payroll and your community has to become poor, but you're actually getting richer because it's called free trade. And number three, which got him in the most trouble, is that it is not the American Defense Department of Defense's mission statement to try and break other countries, to invade the world and invite the world. The only mandate of the Department of Defense and the U.S. military is to protect our people safe and to make sure that our nation is not under attack. Now, just really quick, those three things are what we call a neoliberal consensus. We use the word uniparty a lot, right? That's the uniparty. This is why Kamala Harris is being endorsed by Dick Cheney, because they agree on those three things. No restrictions on who comes into America. It does not matter how much crap you import from the third world with plastics or textiles, because we don't need to make stuff here. And finally, we're going to invade every sovereign country that looks at us funny. Those three things have been governing the country the last 40, 50 years. The reason they hate Trump is not because he talks funny. It's not because, he's all these different, whatever names they say. It's because he does not believe in the core religious orthodoxy of the neoliberal governing elite of Washington, D.C. That's why they hate him.
I don't even think that's an opinion. I think it's a very succinct and nicely put description, but it's hard to see how anyone can argue with that. Clearly, Dick Cheney just endorsed Kamala Harris. Dick Cheney. It's kind of a cool... I'm not saying... Really? So they get a guy who believes you should kill people for profit. We get Bobby Kennedy? I think that's fine. I'm actually pretty... I'm kind of happy about it. He and his horrible daughter... his repulsive little daughter. Anyway, sorry, not to make it personal. She put a friend of mine in jail, and I texted her. I knew her really well. I texted her. I said, I can't, examine your conscience, Liz. She never spoke to me again, but I meant it. She has no conscience. But, okay, so let's just get specific really quick. I love what you said. On the question, we'll just pick one. Well, pick it because I can't say this enough, on the brink of nuclear exchange. I'm not people I know who know a lot about this are very afraid right now, this evening, September 13th, 2024. So I'm upset about it. How do we get here? Well, we got here not because Republicans are like, no, really, the border of some Eastern European country I can't find is much more important than the border at Laredo. No, we got here because our ruling class decided that this was the most important adventure going. And then we have a leadership change in the Republican Party, and Mike Johnson from Louisiana, who I knew is like sort of a normal person, comes in and announces within like a week that his top priority is funding for Ukraine. And I called him and I was like, what? And he did not give me a straight answer. I don't know the answer. How does a guy like Mike Johnson, who always seemed like a nice guy to me, how does he wind up buying into a lie like that that has no connection to the preference of the actual American public and it could get our country destroyed? How did he get there?
Yeah, and look, I have a similar relationship with Mike Johnson. I give him grace, then I get really mad, and then I give him grace, and then I get really mad. And he forgives actually amazingly well when I call him out and I say that he's destroying the country. So I have to give him credit for that. You know what set me off with Mike Johnson? When he
There are so many things, I don't know.
When he as a lawyer voted to say that the FBI doesn't need to get a warrant to spy on us as American citizens, that drove me crazy. When
I'm sure they won't abuse it. The Biden administration just put Tulsi Gabbard on the terror watch list. She serves in the U.S. military right now.
And the intel agencies have spied on your text messages.
A lot,
and probably spied on mine. I mean, they're spying all of us. And here's Mike Johnson, who goes and casts the tie-breaking vote, which is very rare for a Speaker of the House to do, exceedingly rare. Basically, all of it would have said is like, hey, FBI, you have to get a warrant before you spy on American citizens' text exchanges. He said, no, I want to give the Biden FBI, in the middle of a campaign season, unrestricted access to all Trump campaign emails, all text messages, all phone calls. And I found that to be so reckless and irresponsible. Do you know what was the kicker though? You can go back for 7 years. For 7 years when he was on a committee, he was totally against the FISA statute. And as soon as he became Speaker of the House, he's like, well, I think it's very important because a bunch of Americans are going to die if we don't have the warrants and if we don't have all this.
But therein lies the mystery, and it's a sincere mystery. And I even asked him, like, you seem nice. When did you become a monster? And he, people are not self-aware enough to give clear answers to questions like that. But you know him. What happened?
I can't speak to that. Again,
He went to the party where the prostitutes and the drugs were.
He is a
They
creature.
got pictures on it.
He's a symptom of this machine, where unless you have the fortitude of somebody like Donald Trump or Bobby Kennedy, who you're willing to get shot at, see your uncle shot, see your dad shot, see yourself indicted, see yourself smeared and canceled, which is a very rare breed. And understand, Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy have something in common, which Thomas Massey also has, which is a genetic deformity, by the way, which is that you happen to be likable, but you don't care what people think about you.
Right.
Very, very hard to find that
You got
combination.
to think about what people think about you.
And so Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy,
The key to life.
that's what makes them such a threat to the system. Mike Johnson would be an amazing chair of an elder board of a local church. I have no doubt, right? No, I mean that.
As long as things were going well, he'd be great.
No, right, exactly. Like the tithes and the offerings, but hey, if they have to go like build a new cafeteria, like get them out of the way, right? But this goes to the point is that and I have some sympathy for him, some not, because he didn't want the job and he got the job and fine. But he was not the person to stand up to the CIA or the FBI. These are the most powerful institutions on the planet, and they just had him for lunch, literally. One security briefing, he's like, oh, well, I got briefed in a skiff, and at a skiff, a bunch of generals come in with their medals, and they do a bunch of woo-woo, and they say, here we have the A-Rod region and the D-Slam, and if we don't spy on all the text messages of the MAGA faithful in Manhattan, Kansas, we might have another 9/11. And he says, well, that makes perfect sense to me. We might as well keep on having that. And so,
as soon as they release the classified 9/11 documents, they'll know what 9/11 was, and I'll be able to understand that metaphor.
Right, well, and I totally agree. By the way, Donald Trump should declassify all JFK, RFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and 9/11 documents on day one. Do we agree?
Can I just ask you a question? Because sometimes it's more revealing to flip things, do the photographic negative or something, the reverse of it. What would be the justification for keeping those documents secret?
JFK?
9/11 was 23 years ago. Like, why can't I see it? I lived here then. I know someone who died. Like, I don't have a right to see that? Why?
I totally agree. The 9/11 excuse, they say, well, people are still alive that know stuff. That's all a bunch of nonsense.
Well, I'm still alive and I want to know. I paid for it. I live here. I'm a citizen. What?
Of course. Sorry, I just love
I'm sorry. It just enrages me.
we're going to get to the point, by the way, where we're going to be so disconnected from the JFK assassination, it will be like the Lincoln assassination. It'll be like 170 years, and they'll say, no, we have to keep it declassified. Let's just talk about JFK. It's so obvious why they're keeping that declassified. Because at the very least, the government knew it was going to happen, and at the probable, the government was involved in the assassination of JFK. And therefore, no, this is important, because therefore, it is an introductory radicalization event. And they know that. An introductory radicalization event is what all of you had during COVID, which is where you start to then go down a sequence of questions, and once you begin, there's no stopping you. Wait a second, they just told us to wear masks when I shower. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Wait, it's not safe and effective?
Like, wait, my aunt's on her 11th booster, and she has COVID more than I do. That's weird. And so an introductory radicalizing event is when all of a sudden, basically the inner question asker within you is liberated. You guys all know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And at that moment, you're the most dangerous you could possibly be to tyranny and to an illegitimate regime. And JFK assuredly has elements of that. That if we get to the facts, again, we don't know, but we can speculate. We know that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act alone. We know that there's some very suspicious stuff, the motorcade slowing down, what happened to JFK's head, what happened to the grassy knoll, why Zapruder got it on film, head went back to the right. Again, this is not a JFK presentation, but like I watched.
Let's go, Charlie.
I'm just being honest, right? And they're very elementary telling that Lee Harvey Oswald from the Texas School Book Depository, who was a bad shot in his class with a single bolt action rifle, was able to get off that many rounds in a short period of time with pinpoint accuracy, be able to get JFK twice in the head, and then also penetrate the governor of Texas without a second shooter. Every witness said, yeah, there was something kind of there on that hill. Like, shut up, we're going to cancel you. Of course something happened there. All of a sudden, if there is a second shooter on the grassy knoll, therefore, the government lied about it, covered it up, was probably involved. Therefore, it asks the question, what else is our government involved in? And it is the beginning of the end of the illegitimacy of this government. And they know that. So they must keep it declassified. But there's only so many of these things they can cover up, because now with the internet, with social media, and the power of programs like Tucker's and our podcast, they're not able to control the corporate media like they were before. And they know that. And thanks to Rumble and Elon Musk buying Twitter and X, we are on the precipice, regardless of what happens in November, of the greatest enlightenment and the greatest eye-opening event in modern American history, where millions of people can finally see the truth, and those of us who are Christians know the truth will set you free.
Amen. Amen. I didn't know any of this. If you'd asked me 20 years, I mean, my dad worked for the government. I lived in D.C. from the age of 15. I sort of bought into every lie. And, yeah. I did wonder if I'm a hunter and a rifle shooter, and that's one of the crappiest rifles you could ever buy. With like...
What Butler? We were talking
about. No. The Lee Harvey Oswald rifle.
No, for sure.
Are you joking? With like corrosive primer garbage ammo? Really, that's what he used to... I never believed that part of it. But leaving that aside, I wonder if by continuing to lie, they aren't about everything. They're driving all of us a little crazy.
Well, this is why your faith is the most important thing. Because for those of us that are Christians, it doesn't drive you crazy. You actually see what's going on, which is that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and darkness and spirits, that there's a spiritual war here. And you're right, Tucker. I find people in this space that are not anchored to faith, anchored to Jesus, they do lose their mind. Because there is no rational or reasonable explanation for what the country is doing to itself or what we are experiencing. But if you then see and you know that there is a God and we are not him, that there is an entire dimension of angels and demons and spirits that are constantly struggling around us, and that there is a supernatural dimension, as you mentioned, all of a sudden, that does then make sense. It does not make any rational sense to shut down your schools so you can sacrifice the kids so the elderly can live. That makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense whatsoever to keep your marijuana dispensaries open and your alcohol shops open, but the church non-essential. Only a demonic enterprise would do such a thing. Only a demonic enterprise would say that Easter and Pentecost are non-essential, but race rioting and burning down a Wendy's is essential activity. And Tucker, you talk about this a lot. For those of us that know the truth, we know that our God is a God of order and distinction. What is the first thing that God did? In the Hebrew scriptures it says, well, and also our scripture, in the original Genesis, Bereshit, which is in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and then he separated and he made sense, he made order out of chaos. Our God is a God of order, and order only comes with distinctions, and distinctions are necessary. Think about all the distinctions that God set up in the first 6 books of Genesis that are currently under attack. The distinction between male and female. The distinction between man and nature. The distinction between the holy and the profane. The distinction between good and evil. The distinction between infant and adult. These distinctions have always been what Western civilization were built upon. But it is Satan's goal to blur and eventually destroy those distinctions. Because those distinctions of which we get order, and if you do not have that order, then you have the closest thing to satanic chaos here in our country.
Man, it's amazing to me personally to hear you say that and to nod in vehement agreement with every word that you said, considering I think I was the most secular person on planet Earth just like 10 years ago, and I've arrived at exactly those conclusions, I think inductively, but also instinctively. What you said is true. That is true what you just said. So, as someone else who's changed his mind about everything, and I'm happy to admit it, tell me about the progress of your thinking about politics. You're one of the reasons I respect you is because you've always been honest about how you think about things, and when you change your mind, you proclaim it loudly. The evidence changed, and so did my conclusion. I've heard you say that. So tell me what the progress was like for you.
Yeah, and it's interesting, we're in Wichita, which is actually fitting, because there is a reason that actually, and you know where I'm going with this.
I know exactly where you're going. There's a large black building nearby.
Yeah, I don't know if it's black or white. Or
it is.
Rainbow. It might be rainbow, actually. Which is that early, when I got my start in the conservative movement, in 2012, 13, 14, 15, hyper-libertarian forces had taken over the conservative movement. Now, I'm very libertarian on certain things. I'm libertarian on free speech, on privacy issues. I'm libertarian on guns, right? I'm libertarian on certain things. However, the kind of libertarianization of the conservative movement was actually not good for us. It was not good for us to stop caring about the nuclear family. It was not good for us to all of a sudden say that borders don't matter and that America is just an idea and it's an experiment. I fell for that crap for a couple of years. In 2015, 16, 17, again, I'm not trying to pick on any sort of thing here in Wichita, but billions of dollars have flowed out of this city into the conservative movement to try to make us less conservative and more liberal in the conservative movement. That's a fact, okay? It is a fact. And I think it's a tragedy, actually. And I credit Donald Trump for waking me up. Because Donald Trump, I never got angry at the time. I wasn't angry, I never got unsettled about when Donald Trump would insult a reporter or do the Rosie O'Donnell thing. Do you know what always made me unsettled? When Donald Trump would bluntly ask a question that I didn't have a good answer to. When Donald Trump would say, and why are we bringing in people from around the world that hate us? And I'd say, well, according to the macroeconomic theory as espoused by F.A. Hayek and Mondesis, if you look at the curve, you have a steady flow of people coming from other countries that their economic efficiency and output is actually outweighed and therefore good things. Like, what am I saying to myself?
It's called rationalization.
And what Trump was able to do is he never went through that nonsensical abstraction like exercise. Because Donald Trump at his best is someone that has always been so focused on the real and the immediate. Job sites, construction sites, the muscular class, building real things. Donald Trump has never been worried about like the platonic idea of love. Like that is not Donald Trump's thing. Do we all agree with that, right? And
he went light on the Plato in college.
and that's fine.
Sure.
That's right. And I'm not, and people say, oh, Donald Trump is dumb. No, Donald Trump is wise. And he does not get credit for being wise. Wise is the knowledge of things that do not change. So Donald Trump loves the country. He comes along, and he's like, the country that I love is being abused and has become a dumping ground for the third world. It is actively being looted. This is bad. And at the time, I wasn't that forceful against the opposition, but I remember like privately being like, oh, he doesn't understand the economic theory behind all this. And the more I was challenged and questioned, I didn't have a good answer to that. And so it made me start to ask the question, what do I really value? Do I value economic theory? Or do I value my family and my fellow countrymen? Like, do I value a bumper sticker that says that, you know, I don't know, whatever stupid libertarian bumper sticker that was around, 5 or 6 years ago, like live and let live? Or do I value children that should not be subjected to drag queen story hour at their local library? Like, which one is it actually? And then I've always been a Christian and connect the dots. And I gotta be honest, Tucker, you were the one that radicalized me more than anybody else the last 5 to 10 years. Do you guys agree? Because then Tucker would go on his Fox show and would just start asking the same questions. And would have guests that would ask the questions. And they'd always attack Tucker. Oh, he's just asking questions. But isn't that what the pursuit of truth is all about? Isn't that what Christ our Lord did? And if you don't have good answers to simple questions, maybe you're not that deep. Maybe you've overthought yourself into some sort of word salad and you can't answer in a beautiful and a crisp way because you're actually not that deep and you're not protecting things that are good and that are true and everlasting and divine and eternal. And so for me, especially 2017, 18, 19, where I said some really stupid stuff, it really made me go on this journey. And then when I met my wife and we got married and have children, all of a sudden I said, that's my mission statement. It's not about trying to defend democracy in Haiti. My mission statement is my children. My mission statement is to make sure my kids can be raised in a healthy, safe, clean, and orderly country and not have to worry about some foreigner that's been imported from the third world that is going to commit violence against them, that they're going to have to compete against them to buy a home, that they're going to have to compete against them to get a job. And so my mission statement changed from something that was distant and very, very far away in the clouds to what is immediate. And those of us that are conservatives, we must understand, and Tucker hit it in his opening address, it is easy and it is simple and tempting to say that you're fighting climate change. It's hard to raise good kids. And the people who want to fight climate change, they tend to not put any of their energy towards raising good people.
Well, totally. I mean, no, I love it. I love everything that you're saying, and I just always think to myself, I never articulate it, but I think a lot of things I don't articulate. As my wife always says, you need to understand the beauty of the unexpressed thought. But I often think when I'm getting a moral lecture from somebody in charge, which is the one thing they're really good at, is immediately seizing the moral high ground. People who have no basis for moral certainty seize the moral high ground and start lecturing you like you're a bad person. But I always think to myself, why don't you, let's just start with the basics. Why don't you make the same woman happy for 30 years and get back to me? Okay? Why don't we start there? Have you done that? Have you made the same woman happy for 30 years? I don't think you're capable of that, actually. I also don't think you could change a tire. So why don't you shut up? So yeah, because all that matters are the things that really matter. And by the way, this whole system is created, and I mean the economic system, in which Joe Biden voters own 70% of the nation's wealth, and the useful people own 30%. The whole system is set up to give money and prestige to useless people who in a fair society would be screwed because they can't do anything. And that's the truth. So all the things you actually need in life are provided by a really small number of people who are also the worst paid. So I'm just throwing this out there, and I don't mean any offense to the coach, but I actually think that we could get by a week in this country without private equity. I just think we could. I think we can survive. I think we can do that if we all banded together. Do you know what I mean? Or like the payday loan people. I think we'd probably make it without them. But you know we couldn't make it without? Like farmers, people who grow the food, or who fix the cars, or paint the houses, or plumb the bathrooms. Like, all the useful people are despised, and the totally useless people are deified. So it's like, how long could you live? If DEI consultants were eliminated tomorrow, would your kids come to you and say, Dad, I can't make it another day without a DEI consultant? Or school counselors, I don't know what to do, I don't have a school counselor. Some heavy-set, middle-aged lady pushing transgenderism on my kids. I don't know how we can exist without that. And the truth is, we'd be not only fine, but much improved. And yet they somehow have all the money and all the moral authority. And they're writing pieces in the Atlantic about how you're evil because you don't want to live next to the people who just got here illegally. Like, sorry. So yes, really everything that you rejected is this incredibly sophisticated justification for the worst kind of behavior, including economic behavior, which we've been trained to ignore. But how did all the money get in the hands of the worst people? How did the people who killed Jeffrey Epstein, how did they get private planes? And the best people in the country are like so deeply in debt they can't go on vacation. Like, that's not a good system. I don't care what you call it. It's not a free market. It's a totally rigged market, a market rigged for the worst people. Huh.
And look at where the wealthiest counties are. The wealthiest counties in America, which vote for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, geographically used to be around Chicago and Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati. It used to be in the heartland. Now 8 out of 10 of the wealthiest counties in America are around Washington, D.C. It's the ruling class corridor. And what do they create? Well, you guys here in Wichita, Kansas, you create real stuff here. You make real things. It's not abstraction. You guys aren't just trading derivatives, and you're not just shorting stocks.
You're making airplanes. Like, I like airplanes.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes. Or you're extracting minerals from the earth, or you're growing food, or you're transporting those goods and services. You're making real stuff. And yet, the center of wealth has gravitated away from production of things that you need to survive towards an upside-down looting operation that we call paying taxes. And that upside-down looting operation is that you are penalized for playing by the rules. You have to pay taxes that you can't afford that break your back, and also you get a tax with inflation, and everything else gets more expensive. And then the parasites in DC, they take that money and they reverse launder it back, while they then are able to build an imperial capital for what? So our capital went from a place that was nice to visit and was clean and orderly to now being basically the wealth center of the country. And that is a bad, bad sign, everybody. The wealth place should be decentralized and around where entrepreneurs are, where real choices are made, where manufacturing is, not of just the managerial class. And then also look at what their values and their morals are. Around DC is the most secular, the least religious, the most hostile to your value system and your worldview, and yet they're extracting your money, and they're not doing it voluntarily, and that's the kicker. For all of you here that have made money, you've made money through persuading somebody to buy your good or service. In DC, they make it by force, but with a gun. They put the gun to your head, give us money, and if not, we're going to put you in federal prison if you don't pay your taxes. And in DC, similar to what we saw during COVID, is you fail upward. Anthony Fauci gets promoted after what he did during COVID. In a real world, Anthony Fauci should be in Gitmo for what he did during COVID. But in the world of DC, he's lauded. Peter Strzok Smirk, promoted. He has a professorship at Georgetown. Lisa Page, Lois Lerner from the IRS scandal. No one there is held accountable. And the founders never envisioned this form of government. And again, one of the reasons why Trump is so popular is that he has identified it and he has antagonized this Leviathan, this fourth branch of government. And I don't know how much more the heartland of the country can stand the abuse. And can I just talk about Springfield, Ohio, really quick? Which,
of course.
With the the Haitian cat eaters that are coming in. Which, by the way, I did not anticipate us talking about cats this much in the 2024 election. It's just really amazing.
I don't even like cats, and here I am defending them, you know.
I'm neutral on the cat question, for the record, okay? But Springfield, Ohio is a perfect example of how the ruling class has treated the heartland of the country. Step one, we close the factories and we send them overseas so that people don't have work. Step two, we flood those communities with opioids so that they're permanently addicted and we kill a lot of them. Step three, we send their kids, their sons and daughters, to go fight no-win wars, and they come back with permanent health issues. Step four, we flood their town with foreigners after we've completely abused and broken them, and we sent their jobs overseas. Step five, the residents who are still there and have survived all this abuse notice that the foreigners are doing really weird stuff and illegal stuff, like driving ahead on traffic, killing kids, eating cats, and taking geese out of the pond. And then we call the people that are still there in Springfield racist after their factories have closed and their sons died in Iraq and they're addicted to opioids and their local schools being overrun by Haitians, but they're racist for noticing that their home is turning into Port-au-Prince. And you wonder why Donald Trump's poll numbers don't go down. You wonder why so many people wear that red MAGA hat in Springfield, Ohio. Because he is the only lifeline that these people have. He is the only hope that they have. The only person that does not insult them or talk down to them and wants to lead a rebellion, and yes, a revenge campaign against the people that have done this to them and destroyed their home.
Amen. It's not only is it homicidal, which it is, the Sacklers are still billionaires, by the way, their names are still in the buildings at Harvard, but it's insulting, and that's what I kind of can't take. I live in a very rural area. Our waterfowl season starts really soon. I got a call from a friend of mine yesterday. It's just interesting to see people's different takes on news stories. He's not against Haitians. He doesn't know where Haiti is. But he's like, and I've shot geese my whole life, I'll just say. Plans to do it again in a few weeks. And he goes, if I shot a goose without a license, my game warden would haul me off. How do these people show up to our country, they kill the geese, and have to buy a license? I mean, it's a different way of thinking about it. But his takeaway was the same. And by the way, I just want to say, I don't think they're eating the geese. I think they're sacrificing them. They're coming from a country where witchcraft is the dominant religion. That's a fact. And anyone who denies it hasn't actually been to the country, as I have, or doesn't know anything about it. That's a fact. I don't think we should import people who practice witchcraft. I think that should be illegal. I'm sorry, it's my country. I don't want witchcraft here. Fair? Oh, shut up. I don't care what you call me. No witchcraft, because it's real. But what I notice most is the hatred that leaders have for the country. It's hatred. You watch them as they die, you don't care. You lecture them. Our senile president screamed at Americans who dared to complain about the disappearing geese today. You're racists. This is an attack on a group. No, it's not. Don't treat me with contempt. Giving people who come here illegally cell phones, housing vouchers, free plane tickets. Rural hospitals across the country are closing because the emergency rooms are overburdened by people who broke the law to get here. You can't get health care. Try to go to an emergency room right now. You can't get medical care. You pay for that. It's the most insulting thing I've ever seen. It's, by the way, not an attack on the people who came here. I would have too. I mean, I'm not mad at them, actually. I'm mad at our leaders. I've never seen any population treated the way Americans are being treated by their leaders now. And I'm very worried that at some point people will be like, I'm not putting up with this. I don't know why anybody pays taxes in this country. I'm not, for the record, I'm not counseling not paying your taxes because I don't want to get arrested. But I just don't understand the consent level in this country is still incredibly high. Maybe we're just like moving through the motions or something. All the good people are the people they lecture and call names. And because they are good people, they're dutiful people, and they just do what they think they're supposed to do. But I don't know why they're doing it. Why don't you send $1 to people who laugh over your death? Your nephew dies of fentanyl and they don't care, and you're still sending them money? I don't get that, honestly.
Yeah, and the answer though, Tucker, is because they've done a successful pattern of show trials. And,
I know.
And no, this is a real thing. Why do I still pay taxes and you? Obviously, because we have friends in federal prison. Like Steve Bannon right now is in federal prison for not committing a crime. And so, they do this, by the way, to chill the population, to remind you that your door could get knocked on next, and your business could get raided. Now, mind you, this is what Sam Francis, by the way, you're not allowed to talk about Sam Francis, who I love. He had a great term called anarcho-tyranny, which is anarchy for the stuff they don't care about, but tyranny for political crimes. So if you walk the streets of San Francisco, you'll see a bunch of junkies shooting up, people defecating on the side of the street. You could probably get mugged or robbed. Would anyone feel safe walking San Francisco at night? Of course not. And by the way, that alone is a violation of the social contract. If you can't walk your most beautiful cities in your country at night, your leaders have failed and they all must go. That is a very simple test of your leaders. If you cannot walk the most beautiful cities you have at night, you're done. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. If you can't walk in Dallas or Houston or Austin, if you don't feel safe in your own cities at night, then you're a prisoner in your own home.
Well, what's the point of government? Like, what is the point of government, actually? I mean, if
That's the
public
most basic
safety
thing.
isn't the point of government, then what is it? To spread traineeism around the... I mean, like, there's no other point.
Or taxpayer-funded abortions, I guess. I mean, but just to give you an idea of the scale, do you know that we have brought in 5% of the population of Haiti? 5% of the population of Haiti. And no one is stopping it because one of our core founding myths of the modern American experiment, neoliberalism that Trump's trying to defeat, is that, well, diversity is our strength. Actually, diversity is not our strength. Unity is our strength, actually. Whoever came up with this idea of our differences make us stronger, it is self-defeating at its face.
Well, you're married. Is it true in your house? The less you have in common with your wife, the better you get along?
Yeah, those days are great. I mean, again,
Like what?
none of their bumper stickers or their cliches ever make any sense in practice at all. But understand, so you have Joe Biden scolding the population for caring that their home is disappearing. Who should be scolded are the people that are coming in our country and looting our country and saying, we're not going to put up with this. But you're right, Tucker, it is a contempt for the citizen. Why is there contempt? I've done a lot of thinking about this. And part of it is values. I think that's right. I think part of it is Christianity. But I really believe that there's such a hatred for Christianity that any part of the population that is like remotely Christian, they inherently hate you because the real goal is to eliminate Christianity. Do you notice that they never are like enthusiastic about bringing in major parts of the population of Eastern Europe that are super Christian? Yet they're like, let's go bring in the witchcraft country. Kind of weird. Like more witchcraft, less Christianity. I don't understand how that works out. But the contempt is very simple. Is that they think that they are so much better than you. It is an elitist hierarchical position, and that you're an annoyance. That your concerns, that what you're doing is just kind of stay out of the way. And I know people disagree with me. I think this is behind the push for legalizing marijuana. I think this is the push for trying to overly medicate the society, is they do not want a disagreeable citizenry. This is why they want testosterone rates to go down. This is why they wanted to kick the military men out of the alpha men out of the military with the vaccine, is because a population that asks questions and stands up to the powerful is a threat to them. So they'd much rather have you be subdued, just watch TV, not care about what's happening, and just kind of stay on your benzodiazepines or Valium or marijuana and 3 beers a night, and then you're agreeable. But what has always made America different as a beacon of liberty is that we would call BS on tyranny whenever we see it. And that is what is at the heart of this movement. And they look at you as an annoyance.
I agree with that completely. Fentanyl's fine, nicotine is dangerous. Okay, thanks. No, I think all that is true. My sense, though, is that part of it is just human nature. You hate the people you harm, actually, and you love the people that you help. And if you've ever wronged somebody, or, for example, if you're in an argument with someone you love, and that person is being a little crazy, okay, you're not as bothered by it. You're not. Because you're like, that person, she, well, I'm right. I can be totally calm. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But if you behave like a jerk, and everyone who's married does, you're madder. Like if you sort of wrong somebody, you're madder at that person. And I think our leaders understand that they've really wronged the population, like in easy to measure and profound ways. They've screwed up on every big project for the past 30 years, every single one. Not just the worst, but all the economic planning, all the telling us that, you don't need to make anything. We can have an economy based on loaning money and real estate. Yeah, okay. Pat Buchanan's crazy, right? And they've been wrong at every turn. They know they have done the American population wrong, and I also think part of it is they're afraid. They're afraid. They don't have legitimacy, they know that. They're trying to hide that from us by classifying over 1 billion documents, okay? That's part of that too. And in the way that people who've sort of reached the end of their excuses and know that like maybe people are onto them, they're rattled. And that's why they're putting people in jail. It's why they're spying on us, because they know that their grasp is loosening and they're freaked out. I can see it in them.
You are dealing with the most neurotic and paranoid ruling class in the history of the country. And they're paranoid and neurotic because they know they've done great evil.
Exactly.
And that evil is being exposed. They know that. They know that. So, and by the way, they do a bunch of cocaine, which only plays into their neuroses, right?
It makes you jumpy.
Yeah, a little jumpy, right? Oh my goodness, they're gonna find out what we did in Iraq. Yeah, we might, actually. So, and
Just leave an 8-ball in the West Wing, not a big deal. No idea where it came from. Okay.
by the way, that explains so much, doesn't it?
They're so the vibe that comes, it really is the happy party versus the miserable party. The sadness and the internal chaos, the insecurity, just the neuroses that come off these people. I watched Kamala Harris, like the first, she finally remembered her lines, but the first minute of the debate, she's waiting for the Xanax to kick in and she's just like terrified. Sorry.
No, and this is the marching order for all of us. We are closer to victory than I think we might realize. And I don't mean political victory. I hope we win in November. We're working towards that aim. I mean that. And all of you guys can play a big difference in getting Donald Trump back in the White House. And because I think that is the mission critical aim and objective right now. I really do. But, victory in the sense where we're closer towards a breakthrough where more Americans understand what's been happening in these last couple of decades, and we have this realignment that then can be permanent. Just look at the team of all-stars that are starting to come together. The former co-chair of the DNC is now actively campaigning for Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard. We have the world's richest man, Elon Musk. We have Bobby Kennedy. We have an amazing team of free thinkers. And this goes back to a biblical question, though, is that do people want to be free? And that is a very difficult question to answer. In the book of Exodus and Numbers, the answer is no. Is that if you fail to teach a generation the value of liberty, they actually instinctively don't want to be free. When God delivered his chosen people out of Egypt and he performed the most amazing miracles imaginable, the Nile River goes red and frogs from the sky and the firstborn dead and the Red Sea parts and they go into the Sinai Desert. After a couple chapters, they're like, hey, we want to go back to Egypt. We want to go back to slavery. Why? Because the food was better. Literally, we had melons, leeks, cucumbers, and meat. And they say, hey, Moses, can we go back to Egypt? Now, mind you, this is when God blew quail off course and manna from heaven, and they needed and wanted for nothing. But they preferred to be slaves that were taken care of than free citizens in the desert where they had to be responsible. And that is a very important lesson for all of us, that liberty is a value that we must pass on, that we must cherish, and part of the population will never wake up because they would rather be in Egypt. And what is in front of us in this election cycle, and what is in front of us in this culture right now, is do you want to live as a free citizen? And that might be hard. That means you have to provide for your family. You might have to make tough decisions. Or do you want to just go be a Russian serf back in Egypt, where they give you your little ration every month, and you have no liberty and you have no freedom? That is really what's in front of us right now. And I think we're seeing a revival begin to happen, because it really is spiritual at its core, where the American people are going to demand, no, we do not want to go back to Egypt. We want to live free. We know it's harder, but that is the American way.
So you really feel that? I mean, I think it's important. I feel that too, but I'm not quite as articulate and on this question as you are, and I don't travel as much. But you see signs of that?
Oh my goodness, yes. I just want to say, I'm not predicting that Donald Trump will win in November. If we had an election, by the way, where we didn't have mail-in ballots all over the place and signature verification, I think Donald Trump would easily win in November, for the record, but we don't. Tucker, when we go to college campuses, I was at Kansas State today, by the way. I will tell you, they didn't treat us very well, so you guys got to call them up and say, they were worse than Boulder and Madison, by the way. I'm not here to talk about that. But very,
Is that true?
very liberal administration. We had an outdoor event.
In the state of Kansas?
Yeah, we had 2,000 kids there, and we had a permit for amplification, and it ended at 1, and usually campuses let us go over 1. Okay, you have 2,000 kids, not a big deal. I was literally in Boulder this week. Administration's like, it's fine. You guys are having a good time. You know, we're not... I was in Madison, it's fine. In Manhattan, Kansas, the minute that we hit the end of our permit, they started like pulling out plugs. You got to turn off all the mics. Never seen anything like it. It's insane. So, for those of you that are alum of Kansas State, you should contact them and stop giving money to Kansas State. Pull your donations from Kansas State. Okay, so, no, I'm not kidding. Do not fund schools that treat conservatives this way. And by the way, you can say, why is it that CU Boulder, which is like Leningrad, treated Charlie Kirk better than Kansas State? Great talking point. But when we do these events, Tucker, on campus, we cannot find rooms big enough to fit all the students that want to attend our on-campus events. We cannot find physical spaces to fit all the students that want to come to our events. Gen Z men are the most conservative that men have been in 50 years. 50 years. And I also see young and old of people that are starting to shed their prior affiliations. Republican, Democrat mean nothing. And they're starting to get down to first principles. And I mean, we do every day. Anyone watch the Charlie Kirk show, by the way? Anyone? Thank you guys, it really means a lot. And I have to stay ahead of the audience. How informed the average listener and viewer is. Have you noticed this, Tucker? The depth.
I don't solicit feedback. I don't want to be embarrassed.
Yeah, but they are actively correcting me. If I get a date wrong, if I get a name wrong, emailing Charlie, you should know better than that. You got my, and I love that, because that means that the learning is a two-way street, and that I really believe, and I learned this from Dr. Larry Arnn from Hillsdale College. He said, Charlie, we will not save the country. By the way, Hillsdale is America's greatest college, and we all agree. It really is. He said, we will not save the country until we get the citizenry to want to prioritize learning, because you cannot have liberty without learning. And I don't mean liberty like public school learning. I mean, hey, instead of watching the 9th NFL football game that weekend, turn it off and listen to an audiobook. Read the Gulag Archipelago. Read 1984. Read Brave New World. Go deeper. That is, the regime hates an informed population. They hate that you guys know what's going on. They despise when you know history. Because if you know history, you know their next moves.
Oh, I've noticed.
Oh, hey Tucker, have you gotten in any trouble for talking about history?
I mean, look, my only point is, I have a ton of opinions. Probably most of them are wrong. But one opinion I know is right is that free inquiry is the basis of a free society. And you have to be able to ask any question. And I have a lot of children, so I know that there is a stage right around 4 or 5 when there are too many questions to bear. But why? But why? But why? You still have to put up with it. Anybody telling you not to ask questions is a threat to you. That's one of the darkest things, most revealing things you can say, I think. And by the way, anyone who doesn't allow you to ask a question doesn't consider you a human being. Because free people, human beings, can ask any question they want. They can have any opinion they want. They can say out loud whatever they want. Only slaves have to shut up. So it's very revealing of their attitude toward the population that they won't allow it. But I agree with you. If you don't know what happened in the past, how do you have any clue what's going to happen in the future?
And I see a desire, and Tucker, I know you'll agree with me. If you want to get some hope, the growth of long-form podcasting is a sign that the population wants more and deeper content,
Yes.
not shallower and quicker content. The Joe Rogans, the Tucker Carlsons, the Matt Walshes, the fact that the population is going away from cable news and going towards conversations with more nuance and texture and complexity, that is a harbinger for revival.
Well, I keep a list of everyone who's very upset by that. And not because I plan to punish them anyway. I'm never going to punish anybody. I don't really believe in that, actually. But I just want to know who my enemies are, and the enemies of humanity. And there's anybody who has a problem with other people's sincere opinions, with their sincere questions. Anyone who thinks, well, you just can't discuss that, or expresses that, or prevents me from knowing important information about my country or its past, or the world or its past. Anyone who penalizes that is my enemy. And there are a lot of them. Yeah, well, Google's one of them. Last thing I'll say, I want to ask you one final question, but I'm just saying, like, if you have books, I don't know if you remember what those were, but on paper, it's kind of worth keeping them. I mean, they're heavy, hard to tote around. They do get musty after a while. You have to build bookshelves. But the truth is, information can disappear instantly in digital form, which is one of the reasons we've been encouraged to store everything digitally, including our pictures, our photographs, because they're not our own when they're stored digitally. And there are ideas or facts about history that just don't appear on Google, that aren't allowed to be sold on Amazon. And the normal, the kind of censorship community, the Atlantic Magazine, the Atlantic Council, and everyone in Washington, D.C., says, well, there's a reason for that, because people just can't know, or that's misinformation or malinformation, information that may be true but is inconvenient to us because it may be critical of our behavior. You have an absolute right to know anything you want to know, as far as I'm concerned, and the only way you're going to know it is in books. And so I would not throw those away at all. And by the way, if they tell you can't read it, you probably should read it immediately.
I'm also a big believer in having kids be raised in a home where there are libraries where they see physical books around. And I'm a big believer, it's a statement to kids that you take learning seriously, that old things are important, that not everything is digital. And I have a whole thing. I try to read the Bible every day. I can't stand reading a digital Bible unless I absolutely have to. I like reading from a physical Bible. No distractions, no pings, no dings, no phone calls, no tweets, no telegrams. And yeah, that's the other thing, which is, if we want to get back to first principles and you want hope, we must put God first in everything that we do and understand that we are nothing here but just for a short instant, a short little glimpse, and we act not out of outcome, but we act out of obedience. What I am doing right now to try to help Trump win and try to do all these things, I have no idea if we'll be successful. So why do you do it, Charlie? It could be rigged, it could be all this. Happy to go into that. I do it because I love God, and we're called by Jesus to love him in everything that we do, with our heart and our soul and our strength and our mind. And God cares deeply about the type of society that we live in, and it's not God's heart anywhere for us to live in tyranny. Jeremiah 29:7, demand the welfare of the nation that you are in, because your welfare is tied to your nation's welfare. Psalm 97:10, let those of you who love God hate evil. We are called to go into the public square and to contest for those who cannot fight for themselves, to fight for liberty. And liberty is God's idea, not man's idea. And what we are seeing culminate, I think, is a crescendo of a multi-decade spiritual battle, which is now currently manifested in the political. And we do it not because, we hope Trump is going to win. We do it to honor a God that loves us.
Amen. So final question, are you hopeful?
Of course I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, and first, of course, in Jesus Christ, because for those that know Christ, we know how this story ends. And we know that there's a creator and there's a divine perfecter to all of this. But I'm so hopeful when I see the younger generation on campus start to shed this left-wing brainwashing and this Marxism. They attend our Turning Point USA events. They attend our seminars. They attend our trainings, and they want a better life. I see it when I travel the country, and people that were formerly Democrats. In fact, I met one, I think, earlier. She said, that's right there. She said she escaped the woke mind virus because of our videos. That's pretty cool. Stand up. Yeah, stand up. How great is that? Isn't that a great story? Very sweet.
I know her!
Very sweet woman. But let's pretend, though. Let's say that it's a very important question. Because usually the question is, Charlie, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? If I say I'm optimistic, people will go home and do nothing. Because they'll say, well, Charlie's optimistic, so everything's fine, so there's nothing to do. If I say I'm pessimistic, people will go home and do nothing because they'll say there's nothing to do. Instead, it's about what we do is what matters. And I know what some of you are saying. You say, Charlie, I've done everything that's been asked of me. I listened to Tucker's show, I bought the pillow, I've done everything. By the way, promo code Kirk at mypillow.com, just so we're clear, okay?
I never bought the pillow. I don't know. I'm not against the pillow, but I never did buy
The Giza dream sheets and those slippers. Spectacular.
That's so good.
Everybody, it's more than just getting a reverse mortgage on your home. It's more than buying Relief Factor. It's about getting into the arena. And what does that mean? It means if you are actively not being criticized, canceled, smeared, or slandered, you are a spectator, not a participant. We will save this country when all of us are participants in this fight. That means that you guys can sign up and take vacation time and come to Arizona to go chase ballots for Donald Trump. We will put you to work. This means you guys can write letters to swing voters in key states, pleading for them to make the right decision. This means educating your kids, homeschooling your kids, and taking them out of government schools. This means that you're gonna feed your kids and grandkids healthy food and not that highly processed garbage that is currently being put down by the big ag companies. This means you're gonna learn every single week and prioritize it. This means you are going to be an active citizen, and as we said it earlier, an active, informed, thoughtful, deep, and faithful citizen is the greatest threat to a tyrannical regime, and in that, Tucker, I have hope.
Amen. Charlie Kirk, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
The big tech companies censor our content. I hate to tell you that, it's still going on in 2024, but you know what they can't censor? Live events. That's why we are hitting the road on a fall tour for the entire month of September, coast to coast. We will be in cities across the United States. We'll be in Milwaukee with Larry Elder, Rosenberg, Texas with Jesse Kelly, Grand Rapids with Kid Rock, Hershey, Pennsylvania with J.D. Vance, Reading, Pennsylvania with Alex Jones, Fort Worth, Texas with Roseanne Barr, Greenville, South Carolina with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Sunrise, Florida with John Rich, Jacksonville, Florida with Donald Trump Jr. You can get tickets at tuckercarlson.com. Hope to see you there.
Well, that's our show. And so we need to become an active participant then, and that's what I'm doing. Broadcasting this is making my YouTube channel an active participant in what we are trying to do with America, and that is save it. So with that, that was the news, and good night.